Are you artistic? Do you suffer from schizophrenia? If you said yes to either of these, then I have a game for you. Layers of Fear is a psychological horror game that forces you into the shoes of a schizophrenic artist who took the phrase "listen to your heart" and ran with it. Throughout the game, you're forced to avoid your horribly disfigured wife in the pursuit of trying to make your magnum opus. All the while, your house begins to turn into a labyrinth of halls and empty rooms. Seriously, how do you expect me to navigate this shit? Now, I fell in love with this game about 5 years ago, and I personally think it's one of the top 5 best horror games of all times. Recently, I stumbled upon the game in my Xbox library, which brought upon my idea to make a video on it. Now, without further ado, allow me to dive into the story of Layers of Fear. Layers of Fear opens with the player entering his home. All the while, a voice in his head tells him to finish his painting. Once inside, you're allowed to explore the building. You're more than likely going to find notes that have been left lying around, which will give you insight into the player's predicament. Items of note are an invoice for a below-the-knee prosthetic, notes from your wife, and illustrations for a Little Red Riding Hood book laying in the study room that are less than appropriate for kids. Speaking of the study, it is here you're going to find a key, which allows you access to the workshop. Here you will find your easel, it having been covered with cloth, which you're supposed to remove. Your descent into madness begins the moment you remove the cloth from your easel. When you exit your workshop, you're soon going to realize that the layout of the house has changed, with hallways leading you to dead ends being in place of what was once your actual house. As you continue to walk through what was once your house, you're gonna find yourself in a study. Here you're gonna have to complete the simplest puzzle ever, which will allow you to receive a ring from a locked chest. Once picking it up, the ring triggers a flashback to when the player had proposed to his wife, using the cheesiest line I have ever fucking heard. Moving onward from the study room, I entered my kitchen, where I began to have a schizophrenic episode. Fruit began to fall from paintings, knives manifested out of thin air to stab the doors, and the room was shrouded in darkness. When I had finally come down from my episode, I realized something was in the painting. It was the flesh I had so delicately cut from my wife's body. Well, I don't actually know if it's my wife's flesh. I'm just assuming because I don't think booze is gonna numb the pain of a literal razor cutting through my skin. Nonetheless, I moved onwards, arriving back at my workshop. Here I began to paint once again, the final product being some melting flamingos. Chapter 2 opens with us taking an elevator to the 4th floor. Here we find our first major item of the chapter, music sheets. Upon picking the sheets up, a flashback is triggered. The player character remembers a time where he had to beg his wife to finish playing the piano while he painted her. Moving onward, I found myself in a sort of living room. As I went to leave, the entire room began to explode. However, I kept moving forward until I found myself in a little bedroom. Within this room, I found a key. Unfortunately, whenever I picked it up, I began to have a schizophrenic episode. The room darkened, and the door began to shake as someone tried to enter the room.
Oh yeah, you didn't like that.
I'm gonna take a moment to lush about the game some more. I think this is objectively the best scripted sequence in the game. The horror builds up slowly, putting you further on edge, and unlike other sequences in the game, it doesn't use loud and jarring noises to scare you. Now, enough about my love for this game. Let's get back to the story. Leaving the room, you'll find a trail leading to a painting. Looking at said painting will cause it to melt, and summon a walking stick. This is another integral story item, giving us more insight into the main character. It's unclear how it happened, but given the fact that he has a prosthetic and a walking stick, it's easy to say that his leg is the definition of fucked. Moving onward to the final room of the chapter, we find ourselves in our bedroom from the beginning of the game. Our singular task in this room is to use the phonograph.
What the door doing?
If it wasn't apparent, Satan decided he was going to record a vinyl today. With the room melting, the second piece to my magnum opus was revealed to me. A vial of blood. The main character describes the process of gaining this blood as one similar to siphoning gasoline. Unlike the flesh, it's unclear whether this is the player or the wife's blood. However, what is clear is that the player is retarded. Returning to my workshop, I began to paint once again, resulting in what could only be described as melting flesh. Once again, I entered the depths of my mind, hellbent on acquiring yet another special item for my magnum opus. My first encounter with my wife in this chapter would be immediate, with her stalking me from outside a window, followed by her manifesting in the room with me. I'm gonna be honest, in my several playthroughs of this game, this was the first time I had ever encountered this sequence, as I had usually rushed through the opening of this chapter every time.
Hey yo, hold up. I don't like that game. That's not nice. That's actually incredibly fucking mean.
And if you couldn't tell, it very much caught me by surprise. Continuing deeper into the house, I found myself at my third fucking schizophrenic episode of the video. This time, spearheaded by my whore wife. Fortunately, my misogyny would prevail in this encounter, allowing me to shun her. Moving onwards, I began to find myself deeper and deeper in my home, eventually arriving at the basement. I'm gonna praise this game for the final time in this video, cause holy shit, this segment is good. The piano music absolutely slaps, and the visuals of everything floating is just so soothing it makes you forget that this is a horror game. Of course, the facade has to end at some point, but the game does it in the best way possible. The piano slams closed as the furniture falls to the ground, and the candles go out, leaving you in an empty, quiet, and dark room. The only thing that gives off any light is the object you had searched for this whole chapter. A bone. According to the painter's dialogue, he crushed the bone into a dust to mix in with the white paint. Also, he could just use it as an undercoat. Here's a little game theory I came up with. Considering the fact that the player has a below-knee prosthetic, I'm gonna assume that he cut his own leg off to get this bone. Or it could just be his wife's. Exiting the basement, we arrive back in our workshop, where we paint for the third time, resulting in something that vaguely resembles our wife. Albeit completely fucking distorted wait. Well, would you look at the time? This is probably my longest video ever, and I've only gone through half the game. I mean, obviously this was gonna be a two-parter. I mean, come on, part 1 is literally in the title. If you want to see this to completion, I guess you're just gonna have to wait. My next video will not be the second part, because I don't want to make back-to-back videos on the same game. Instead, it's gonna be a Subnautica video, so stay tuned for that, I guess. Anyways, like if you enjoyed this video, and I guess I'll see you next time. See ya.